Today is a foggier and rainier day, but we are back on our path, a beautiful path, and we will have our next talk. Last time we talked about the individual of a species and how that individual expresses himself or herself or itself, and the limitations that the species, or in fact any collective, puts on that expression. And there is this dynamic between the expression by the individual, always trying to exceed the bounds of the species, the bounds of the collective, and the constraints placed by the form of the species and the structure of society or the structure of the collective on that expression. And that dynamic, the pushing for expression and the constraints of the collective, evolves. That's the dynamic of evolution. Also with the competition of other species, other collectives, similarly expressing or attempting to express what they can. And with that dynamic, we talked about how man, the human, man, woman, child, human, individual, is conscious of this, can understand it, can talk about it, can participate in that dynamic, and hence consciously make choices that affect it. So what should be those choices? What should be the nature of this conscious action and participation with nature in evolution? That is the question for today. The other question is, what is the effective mechanism? I mean, we might want to do something based on our intuition, or based on our understanding, or based on our desires. But how to do it? What is the effective mechanism of doing it? And what is it that would actually succeed, both in terms of pushing the evolutions, pushing the speciation, and making it stick, making it last? Because in the end, evolution is completely amoral. The only definition of success, looking at it from the point of view of nature, is the number of copies of a gene sequence that are there out there in this universe. That is its notion of success. There's no morality, there's no direction in it except the one that emerges from this one numerical property. Let's start talking about the effectiveness of an action that we might take. In a way, you can think of the genetic lineage as a way of encoding and transferring information, over time. So the continuity, or the sort of approximate or emerging continuity of a species, is the continuity of the information, or the slowly changing corpus of information that is transferred from individual to individual across generations over time, which we generally call the species. Now, this transfer of information happens through reproduction, making a copy. And this copy is made at a specific time. Of course, in the human case, it is through the pregnancy and the formation of the new individual. And that's when the parents are at a certain stage of their development. So the characteristics of the parents at that time, or in fact whatever is already there in their genetic encoding, with some sort of chance combination of the two sets of genetic sequences that is passed along to this new individual that is forming. So in what sense can a conscious choice or action influence this choice or this expression of the new individual that is forming? It's almost as if it is, in a sense, predetermined. So could the individuals have done something that changes, what their genetic information, genetic sequence encodes, and then affect some sort of a choice in the combination, so that that which is passed along is more to their liking, or more aligned with where they think this evolution of the human species should go. And it seems very unlikely that that can be done just naturally, because it seems almost too mechanical. Technology could come in here in multiple ways. For example, technology could be used to enhance the individual. We already do that in so many ways through medical sciences, and even just better training of the body. We talked about that last time through the Olympic swimmers and so on, trying to exceed what the form has been able to do in the past. Technology plays a big role in there, both in the training as well as potentially more directly through enhancement of the physical form, perhaps even the psychological operation, the chemical pathways operating in the individual through various drugs or medications could enhance those. Or finally, you could actually have physical interventions such as devices that help the individual. It's hard to see how the technology operating on an individual can help pass along the characteristic to the offspring. Maybe it can, but it seems awfully a forced way of trying to attempt something. The scope of the technology seems limited to that particular individual, and seems harder to transmit in a decisive way to shape the direction of the evolution of that lineage. Another way technology could come in, of course, is through intervening in the genetic sequence itself, editing the genome of the individual so that certain genes are suppressed, some others are enhanced, maybe even new ones are created in there to come up with a genetically modified individual. And if that is slight enough and there is natural selection of those individuals, they can propagate and create a population that is big enough to sustain and give a direction to that lineage possible. Now, at the current state of development, we don't have enough information, enough knowledge to figure out what exactly to change, what exactly to modify in order to achieve certain properties. Leave aside figuring out what properties are desirable to achieve. Obviously, we can always desire that the current human form is perfected even more. So we are less susceptible to disease, to age, are stronger, more productive, more intelligent, beautiful, symmetrical, whatever. You can promote all of those characteristics, but I would say those are not qualitatively different, and you are sort of selecting for a stabilization of the feature set that we already have. And in the main, that's what natural selection mostly does. It's mostly a stabilizing force that selects for more stable lineages to carry forward. In terms of the mechanism, we talked about the pure genetic mechanism, and if you look at it as a means of carrying information, of transferring information from individual to individual across generations and across time, over time we have developed more mechanisms to do that. Language, for one thing. Obviously, a lot of the animal species, even plant species, through scents and other chemical means, communicate. Specifically through signals and voice, even many animal species can communicate. Humans, of course, have taken it to the next level through the development of structured language and semiotics and understanding of the structure of language and grammar and vocabulary and ever more specialized ways of referring to things, remembering things, and communicating things. Obviously, humans have figured out a way to carry information forward in a path that is parallel to the one nature evolved for carrying forward information in the genome. Now, does that affect the speciation and genetics of the situation itself? The whole language phenomenon is probably the last 20, 30, maybe 40,000 years, 50,000 years out of the development of the human, which is perhaps a million or 2 million years, out of the development of apes and chimpanzees, which might be tens of millions of years. So it's not enough time to tell if the development of the language has affected the ability to transfer information genetically. Once more, we are at our rock. I don't know if I can climb it up today because it's somewhat slippery. I'm back in the cathedral of tall trees on a much foggier day, though. So this alternative mechanism of transmission of information, could that be the way to speciation? Again, obviously it can inform it, as individuals come up, they can use that information to make choices. And if enough sufficient number of individuals use that information to make choices, they might make choices that are, in a sense, compatible with that information. And hence they can start to self-select into groups that have certain characteristics that they want to pass along. And maybe that's a way to speciation. But again, that's an indirect mechanism, and we will come back to this. And broadly, this is about nature versus nurture, or nature plus nurture. You can call these things as part of the nurture, whether it is technology enhancing the individual, or technology enhancing society, the information available to society, are part of the environment, a part of the nurture. Another pathway is training. We talked about it a little bit, of course, the individuals training themselves and exceeding the expression of the individual as constrained by the form of the species or by the expectations of the societal constraints. But training goes beyond that. We go to school, we learn a lot of stuff through education. We learn in family groups and social groups, and certain traits get selected. Society chooses what individuals meet and essentially procreate. Of course, individuals choose also, but there's this dynamic again between individuals and society, in a sense, choosing the combinations that then get passed along to become part of future society. We're back at our little gorge, the pass. Right here it is. We're going to go through. Like we did last time. Pretty wet out there. We were talking about training. In effect, that's a way where the collective, has encoded some information, some wisdom that helps the species, helps the individuals of the species, helps that smaller collective in society to succeed, whatever that means to that collective or to that individual. And they train individuals with that information and that wisdom. And obviously individuals experience stuff, they learn stuff, they add to that collective wisdom, they replace it, they enhance it, it evolves. So all of that sort of co-evolves. The information, the wisdom, the collective, the individual, and through the expression of the individual and variations of it, the species itself. You can also take a spiritualist view of this whole phenomenon. So far we have been talking mostly the mechanical view of the process of evolution, speciation, development of the individual, the technology, the information, the wisdom, the training. The spiritualist view. Now, again, let me emphasize that nature and evolution doesn't care whether you follow a spiritualist view or a materialistic view or any other view. Its notion of success is the proliferation of copies of genetic information. But still, it's worth mentioning what the spiritualist view is. The spiritualist view is essentially that the next step and the next step and the next step, the whole staircase of forms, of principles of evolution are already present. They are already involved, already descended into the matter, into material plane. And in a way, evolution, the action of society, collective, the action of the individuals, the action of training, information, collection, storage, transmission, all of that is a way for that involved planes of spiritual existence to evolve from matter and in matter and become concrete. So in effect, part of the individual's effort and the collective training could be to get in touch with those faculties, with those latent planes of possibilities, experiences, get in touch with them in a psychological or spiritual manner, and hence start in a way living in them, and hence create pathways to form that form to create the next step in the species, or through what is often called yoga. Still raining, but a beautiful hike nevertheless.